For nearly 30 years, one of the most powerful mafia bosses in America wandered the streets of New York in a bathrobe. He mumbled to himself, talked to park benches, and appeared completely detached from reality. Neighbors thought he was mentally ill. Federal investigators thought he was faking. And behind the bathrobe was a man secretly running one of the most powerful crime families in America. His name was Vincent The Chin Gigante, and his act may have been the greatest performance in Mafia history. Vincent Gigante was born in New York in 1928. Before entering organized crime, he was a professional boxer. Known for his toughness and willingness to fight, Gigante quickly earned a reputation on the streets. Eventually, he became associated with the powerful Genovese crime family, one of New York's infamous five families. At the time, the Genovese family was already considered one of the most influential criminal organizations in America. Gigante wasn't just joining a gang, he was entering an empire. In 1957, Gigante became involved in one of the most famous incidents in Mafia history. Powerful mob figure, Vito Genovese, wanted control of the family. Standing in his way was boss Frank Costello. On May 2nd, 1957, Costello entered the lobby of his apartment building. A gunman approached. A shot rang out. The bullet grazed Costello's head. Miraculously, he survived. Authorities arrested Gigante for the shooting, but Costello refused to identify him as the gunman. Without a cooperating witness, the case collapsed. Costello eventually stepped aside, and Vito Genovese gained control. The failed assassination changed Mafia history, and it launched Gigante's rise within the organization. Unlike flashy mob bosses such as John Gotti, Gigante avoided publicity. He rarely spoke to reporters, rarely appeared in public events, and rarely attracted attention. While other bosses embraced fame, Gigante preferred secrecy. By the 1980s, he had become the undisputed leader of the Genovese crime family. Law enforcement believed that the family controlled gambling, loan sharking, labor racketeering, and other criminal enterprises generating millions of dollars. Yet Gigante remained difficult to prosecute, partly because nobody could prove who was really giving the orders. Then came the act. Beginning in the late 1960s and continuing for decades, Gigante regularly appeared in public wearing a bathrobe and slippers. He wandered neighborhood streets, mumbled incoherently, and sometimes appeared confused or disoriented. His lawyers argued that he suffered from severe mental illness and was incapable of standing trial. For years, the strategy worked. Court proceedings stalled, cases were delayed, and prosecutors struggled to move forward. But many investigators remained skeptical. FBI surveillance suggested Gigante was capable of conducting business normally behind closed doors. Some informants claimed the bizarre behavior only appeared when outsiders were watching. The government increasingly believed the illness was an act. The turning point came when former Mafia insiders began cooperating with authorities. Several witnesses described Gigante as fully aware and actively running the Genovese family. One of the most damaging witnesses was Peter Savino, who provided information about Gigante's activities and communications. Federal prosecutors built a case showing that Gigante had spent years deliberately pretending to be mentally ill. The evidence was overwhelming. In 1997, Gigante was convicted on racketeering and conspiracy charges. Even then, questions about his mental condition continued. But in 2003, he pleaded guilty to charges related to obstruction of justice, and he admitted that the Mental Illness Act had been exaggerated and maintained to avoid prosecution. The performance that had protected him for decades was finally over. The man who had fooled neighbors, reporters, and courts could no longer maintain the illusion. By the early 2000s, many of the old mafia bosses were dead, imprisoned, or cooperating with authorities. Gigante represented something different. He was one of the last major bosses from an earlier era of organized crime, an era built on secrecy, discipline, and invisibility. While other mafia leaders became celebrities, Gigante spent decades hiding in plain sight. That approach allowed him to survive far longer than many of his rivals. Vincent Gigante may never have been the most famous mafia boss, but he may have been the most patient. For decades, he convinced much of the world that he was a harmless old man wandering the streets in a bathrobe. Meanwhile, prosecutors believed he was quietly directing one of the most powerful criminal organizations in America. Whether you view him as a criminal mastermind or a master actor, one thing is certain: very few people have ever played a role for so long and gotten away with it. If you enjoy real, historically accurate crime stories like this, make sure to subscribe to A Veil of Crime so you never miss an episode. This story is part of the Blood Oaths, the Mafia Files series, where we uncover the real stories behind the Mafia's most powerful bosses, deadliest betrayals, and biggest secrets. Watch the full series and see how the stories connect, because every Blood Oath comes with a price. And if you'd like to support the channel and help keep these stories coming, you can buy me a coffee using the link on the page. Your support helps keep A Veil of Crime growing. Until next time, some gangsters hide behind guns, others hide behind money. But Vincent Gigante hid behind a bathrobe, and for decades, the world believed him.